Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're revisiting a story many of us know very well, the story of Sri Krishna and Rukmini. It's usually held up as, this amazing tale of divine love, brave elopement.
Absolutely. It's a narrative that really resonates, often presented as the ultimate example of devotion, of defying everything for love.
Right, but what we want to do in this deep dive is maybe look at it from a slightly different angle. We're using some ideas from a new source. It's called Krishna and Rukmini, Divine Love, Human Agency. And this book sort of encourages us to look past the romance and consider some more, let's say, controversial aspects.
It's trying to get us to think about things like agency, what society expected back then, and the power dynamics that might have been underneath it all.
Yeah, and this source, it really pushes us to see the story in a maybe more modern light, or at least a less purely traditional one. It points out elements that hint at those power structures, the social rules of the time.
Exactly. Makes you question what was really going on.
So I guess the big question we're exploring today is this. Rukmini's famous abduction, was that purely her asserting her own will, an act of love and agency? Or was it maybe more complex, perhaps something closer to an arrangement, shaped by the constraints of her world? Let's get into it.
Okay.
So the way the story usually goes, Rukmini's decision, her choice to go with Krishna, it's painted as this incredibly brave act, right? She's choosing her love, defying her family.
It's very much the archetype of the individual against the system. Purely consensual, bold defiance.
Yeah, but this source, Krishna and Rukmini, divine love, human agency, it kind of makes us pause and ask, well, how much real agency did she have? And when we say agency here, we mean her actual capacity to make independent choices, given the time she lived in.
Right, because society then had very, very specific roles and limitations for women. The book suggests that even her defiance, which was definitely bold, might have been more a strategic move within the existing system.
Okay. So not necessarily breaking the rules entirely, but maybe finding a path within them.
Precisely. It argues her actions, however courageous, were probably still operating within the strict social structures of that era. It's about understanding the difference between, say, a completely free choice, as we might think of it now, and choosing the best option available from a very limited set.
That adds a whole layer of complexity, doesn't it?
It really does. The source suggests that, while a woman might express a preference, who she actually ended up marrying was often tied to broader concerns, politics, family alliances.
So Rukmini's choice might have been less about if she married and more about which powerful figure she aligned with.
That's certainly the interpretation being put forward, yes.
Yeah.
That it was perhaps a choice among predetermined acceptable options.
Okay, so if we follow that line of thought, it naturally makes us look again at the whole love at first sight element. The traditional story really leans into that pure love is the only reason.
It does. But our source encourages us to, be a bit more pragmatic, to consider the potential political angles for both Krishna and Rukmini's family. For Krishna, marrying a princess from Vidarbha, a powerful kingdom, that would have been a significant political win.
It strengthens his position, builds alliances.
Exactly. The book talks about how crucial those kinds of marriages were for ambitious leaders or rising powers at the time.
So even if Rukmini herself, in the story, denies political motives, the context suggests they were likely there.
It's very probable, yes. The backdrop was certainly political, whether acknowledged or not. And that brings us to the letter.
Yes, the famous letter Rukmini sends to Krishna, often seen as this peak moment of female empowerment, right? Her actively choosing her husband.
On the surface, absolutely, it feels incredibly assertive. But the source asks us to consider, was it truly about pure, unconstrained empowerment? Or was it maybe more of a desperate, calculated plea?
A plea for what, though?
A plea for a preferred outcome. A way to navigate a system where her marriage was going to be decided for her anyway. Maybe it was her way of steering things towards the least bad option, or the one she actually desired within those tight constraints.
So less I choose you freely, and more please choose me over the other guy.
Something like that.
Yeah.
The book frames it as a very clever, strategic move, but one still operating within the rules. It highlights that this kind of appeal, while rare and bold, was often a last resort for women trying to avoid a truly awful or politically damaging arranged marriage.
It wasn't about rejecting marriages.
Well, no, not at all. It was about trying to exert some influence, however limited, on who she married within that unavoidable framework. Choosing freedom within the marriage system, not freedom from it.
That really reframes her actions. Okay, so if the letter is maybe a strategic move, How does that change how we look at the abduction that follows? Traditionally, it's just Krishna swooping in to save her from Shishupala.
Right, the heroic rescue narrative.
Right.
But the controversial angle from this source suggests it was quite a bit more than that. It argues Krishna's action wasn't just a rescue.
What else then?
It was a major power play, a very public, very bold display of his strength and influence, directly challenging his rival, Shishupala, and also asserting himself against the established authority of Vidarbha itself.
Wow, so like a political statement disguised as a romance?
That's the interpretation, yes. It suggests this was Krishna basically marking his territory, humiliating an opponent on a grand stage, and cementing his own rising power. A calculated political maneuver wrapped in the language of love.
So seeing it that way, it becomes less about just two people in love and much more about regional power struggles.
Exactly. It was likely both, but the political dimension might have been far more significant than the traditional telling admits.
Which brings us right to that core tension the book keeps highlighting. The clash between society's rules and an individual's desires.
That fundamental conflict. You have these rigid expectations around arranged marriage, family duty, political alliances, and then you have the individual's own hopes, feelings, desire, for some say, in their own life.
And the source does acknowledge that Rukmini's act, however we interpret the motives, was pretty revolutionary for its time, didn't it?
Oh, absolutely. It doesn't dismiss the boldness. It recognizes it as a remarkable assertion of personal will within a very restrictive context. A woman taking that kind of initiative was extraordinary.
That is always a but.
But yeah, it also insists we recognize how much her choices, even the bold ones, were still shaped and limited by the world she lived in. The lack of real options, the overriding importance of societal structure, it forces you to ask, how much genuine agency is even possible when the whole system is tilted against it.
It really makes you think about how we project our modern ideas of freedom and choice onto these ancient stories, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. The book really pushes back against that, reminding us that choices back then were often tangled up in duty, survival, politics, influence, not just personal fulfillment as we tend to prioritize it today.
So, wrapping this up, we've looked at this tension, Rukmini's actions, a powerful moment of asserting herself.
Yes.
But also maybe a really smart maneuver within the tough constraints and power games of her era. Seems plausible too.
Yeah, it paints a picture that's much richer and frankly more complicated than just a simple romantic elopement.
Well, it certainly compels you to look again at a story you thought you knew. To see beyond the surface romance maybe, to those undercurrents of power, society, expectation.
And how all those things shaped even these legendary choices.
So the question we leave you with is this. After considering these different perspectives, how do you see Rukmini now? Do you see her mainly as this icon of defiance, asserting her agency against the odds? Or do you see her more as a figure whose choices, brave as they were ultimately channeled and maybe limited by the powerful societal and, yes, divine forces of her time? It's definitely something to mull over.